Good evening, everyone. The wisdom this evening is be kind, rewind. Be kind, rewind. I mean, it's not bad advice. Let's just be honest.
Aha!
Yeah. Also, like a surprise realization that is also a good. That is also good. So, welcome to episode number 46 of Restitching the Tapestry, everyone. Yes, Leo, I am always fashionably late. I like to keep everybody theatrically on the edge of their seat. So, so thank you for being so patient. So welcome to episode number 46 of Restitching the Tapestry. We are inching our way closer to 50 episodes, which we are both very excited about. Um, Tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about the medical industrial complex. So, of course, before we get to talking about the complexities of that complex, we are going to just catch up a little bit and share with one another how we've been doing this past week, of course. So, Ari, what have you been up to? What's been going on?
I have been losing weight. I lost 4 pounds this week. I lost, yeah, in the last 2 weeks, I've lost 8 pounds because I started on a new medication and I've just been losing weight and it's been great.
That's
I'm actually like super excited. And I have been doing my daily divination on my Tarot Time with Ari channel, where I pull cards and I read your daily tarot readings. And I do weekly tarot readings. Yeah. And I've been doing that. So, yeah, that's what I've been up to. What
if you
about you?
haven't subscribed to that channel, go check out that channel. So, Leo says that the audio is muffled. Is it my audio or Ari's audio or both? If you could answer that, that'd be great because I am using a new device this evening. So if it is not clear enough, I can switch to something else. So what I've been up to lately, oh, it's mine. Okay, so
I see, I was right. It was that I was having trouble hearing you, and I was like, it might be my headset, but I was like, it sounded like your audio was having trouble.
okay, hold that thought one moment. We will see. Microphone.
Okay. Can you hear me more clearly now?
Yes, you're much clearer now.
Okay. So clearly my webcam microphone is much clearer than these ones, which I mean, I think these are designed for like phone conversations, not like recording of dialogue like this. So thank you everyone. Sorry about that. So what I've been up to this past week, I've been doing a lot of writing. I've actually been able to sit down and actually do some writing. I've been playing a lot of video games lately. I recently got my old Xbox set up. I think I may have mentioned this in the last stream, but I've been playing the old 2004 Atari Godzilla game titled Godzilla Save the Earth, and it's been delightful destroying everything with Mothra because she is a queen. So that's kind of like when I've been stuck on poems, I've just been going to like annihilating other creatures. Like that my surefire way of focusing my mind. So
Perfect.
and then beyond that, I've been doing some gardening, but it's been really hot outside the past couple of days, so I've been kind of trying to avoid going outside if possible.
It's true. It's that July humidity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not a fan of that. Although I will say that I've been really excited that we've been getting storms lately. Um, because I feel like the last few years we've been kind of just getting like really sad little fizzly storms, nothing like wholesome. But in the past few days we've gotten some really wholesome
Oh, I
storms, which
forgot
I'm
to
excited
mention the
about.
storms knocked down my gutters on my building. Like my gutters are like hanging down on my building. They're like lower.
Really?
Yes, like they're coming by to fix them tomorrow. But like they're like not attached to the building anymore.
That's concerning. Hopefully somebody fixes that.
Yeah, my sister went to the office and was like, "Do you want to fix this before it falls on somebody?"
Shane is getting married this Sunday. Woo!
Yay! Woo!
Leo says, playing Godzilla Save the Earth, destroying everything with the goddess of peace. You know what? Mothra's a goddess of peace, but she knows how to kick some butt when necessary. So, tastefully and selectively a goddess of peace. So, but have you done anything else this past week, Ari, or have you?
I've been writing a bunch of poetry.
Yes. Are you preparing for a new collection, perhaps?
I'm working on it. I don't know exactly what
My
I'm
partner
doing.
just made a cameo. He's running. Hi. He had to grab something out of the office.
Bye, Britain.
Hi, bye. Okay, so what were you saying? Sorry about that.
I don't have an idea about what I'm doing yet, but I'm working on it. It's coming along.
Well, the more you write those, I think the more that idea might develop. That's what I usually do when I'm coming up with my own like collections. Like, I'll write a few poems, and if there's like a theme that follows through the poems, then that's when I'm like, oh, okay, something's coming up.
How's your collection coming along?
It is 80% complete. 80%. So it's getting there. It's almost there. I'm probably over the next couple of weeks, I'm gonna like print off all of my poems, lay them across the floor, and start figuring out the order in which everything goes in. I've been kind of already doing that, but I really just want to obsessively print everything off and just visualize
Lay
it.
them out and put them in order.
Exactly. I think it's going to be fun to do that. And I'm going to like try to document it on video too, just to kind of like reflect on the process, so on and so forth. All right, but I digress. I got us off on a tangent. I apologize. All right. So before we get started on tonight's topic, I'm of course going to go over our show's mission statement. Many witness different atrocities, large or small, that fray the social fabric around us. Much of the time, many may feel powerless and know not how to address such things. And this fray has gotten worse with the rise of social media because we are able to share in this trauma collectively as it goes viral in real time. So in our experiences of perceiving this trauma that we're experiencing, that a lot of different communities are, we have to also consider specific communities, like marginalized communities that might be affected more so by it. And we need to think about what we can do to mend those communities. And that's one goal we have with our show here. We want to restitch that social tapestry by exploring these different topics and developing an understanding through learning ourselves and also perpetuating those things that we are learning. So, and hopefully we will do that tonight with talking about the medical industrial complex. If you remember our episode about the military industrial complex and academia, like both of those are very, very large institutions, and they're very large topics to tackle. So Ari and I are going to be talking about a variety of different angles pertaining to the medical industrial complex tonight.
And it's a beast.
It is a beast, but we are going to slay it. We're going to slay it. So Leo's here, Shane is here, Arby's here. We have Rogue Agent Killer Rodan. It's good to see all of you. Shayna. Arby, yes, you may, of course. It's good to have all of you here with us tonight. So, Ari, how should we begin with this? I guess we should begin by defining what on earth the medical industrial complex actually is.
So, according to Wikipedia, the medical industrial complex is a network of corporations which supply healthcare services and products for a profit. So, basically, it's for-profit health services.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And additionally, I found something else that kind of like adds to like the breadth of like the different sector, because like the medical industrial complex has a variety of different sectors to it, if that makes sense. And according to encyclopedia.com, the components of the medical industrial complex consists of more than a dozen major aspects, including hospitals, nursing homes, physicians, salaried and free for service physicians, home health agencies, supply and equipment manufacturers, drug companies, insurance companies, managed care organizations, specialized centers like urgent care, surgeries, dialyses, hospices, nurses, all other healthcare workers, administrators, marketers, lawyers, planners, and other research organizations. And in addition to these entities, thousands of other organizations are springing up in long-term care and other services for the disabled and aging, including social services that have incorporated healthcare components such as senior centers. So as you can imagine, like a lot of people assume that the medical industrial complex is just say like hospitals and insurance companies. Like that's what I thought it was when I first started researching it. But once I started delving a little bit more deeply, I realized that it's like I kind of think of the medical industrial complex as having like these little tendrils extending themselves into a bunch of different
But it's
areas.
also like medical devices. It's addiction rehab centers. Um, Nursing homes. Uh, it's a bunch of stuff. It's all anything that has to do with healthcare is part of the industrial complex.
Not to mention, because I don't think either of our definitions mentioned mental health care either, right? Like
Right.
that's a whole other sanctum to it too that is often under discussed, but also having its own, issues in of itself. So, yes, RP, this is my Evanescence, one of my Evanescence band shirts. So, Shayna, that is, yes, the healthcare system is more broken than the 10 Commandments. I could not agree more. Plus, another one that I forgot to mention that is incorporated in the medical industrial complex would be like veterans health, so on and so forth. That's a whole nother like area that has a lot of its own like issues to it that warrant discussion. That could be an entirely separate stream even of itself too.
Yeah, for sure.
So my goodness. Leo has good news. My mother finally got approved for an electric scooter. That's awesome. Good. Those are really expensive too. Like,
Yeah. Those are like $1,000 or something, at least.
oh, it really depends on the brand. Like there are some that I think go up to as much as like 10, 15,000. And what's alarming, and conveniently we're going to be talking about this later too, but like wheelchairs, for example, are way more expensive than one would anticipate. Like well over $1,000 in many instances. So, but so that, like, in a nutshell, that is what the medical industrial complex is. Okay. So I guess if we were to veer into our next question to explore, Ari, and this is kind of like a more personal question for both of us. Like, how have you and I individually interacted with the medical industrial complex?
Oh my God. I've interacted so much with the medical industrial complex. It's ridiculous. Like, we'll get into some of the specifics of like how I've dealt with some like specific hospitals. Because there's one question later on that talks about hospitals turning into health spas. I want to talk about like the different types of hospitals that I've been in, where they talk about health spas. Because I've been in some really nice hospitals and I've been in some really bad hospitals. But like,
Mhm.
I have been in and out of hospitalizations. I've been in 4 separate hospitalizations for my mental health. So I have been through this. I see doctors all the time. I see therapists all the time. I interact with my insurance companies. I deal with Medicare and Medicaid all the time. I basically like, because I can't pay for my health insurance, I basically have the government paying for my health insurance. So I had to go through DHS to get my health insurance taken care of. And that was uh, quite arduous. I've had to, because I'm low income, had to fight hospitals because I got $20,000 ambulance and hospital bills, and saying that I can't pay these bills, and having to basically like get them written off um, because I'm low income, and they just magically disappeared, which I don't know how that's possible, because they make these ginormous bills, and then all of a sudden they just are like, oh yeah, you don't have to pay that. And it's like, well, why did you give me a bill if you weren't gonna have me pay for it? Like they just they will test you to see if you'll pay for it, and then if you can't pay for it, they will just wave it away, and then you just don't magically pay for it. Like, it just blows my mind how they'll try to like get you at these hospitals, these for-profit hospitals, um, and they try to intimidate money out of you, uh, and you basically have to be like, I can't pay for this. Like, there's just no way.
Mm-hmm.
I have had to fight with companies about. I'm having a fight with my pharmacy about paying for my medications. I've had to fight for my insurance companies before because I lost my health insurance for about a month. Um, all the time, all over the place. If there's something with the medical industrial complex, I've had to deal with it.
You've had a lot more dealings with the medical industrial complex than I have. Most of my dealings with it have been recent in my journey and getting placed on medication, because at first my insurance for some reason wasn't covering my medications. And they really, like, I tried like contacting my insurance to gain an understanding of why that was the case, and they really didn't explain it. Like, they just kind of talked in circles, like, per policy, blah 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 blah. They didn't even really explain what policies they were talking about. That they kind of just settled with that. Well, I like communicated this with my doctor, and my doctor actually managed to, find a solution for me. I don't know what she did specifically, but she found some sort of solution, and now like my insurance covers it. But it was just like one of those situations where I was just like, why are you trying to give me the runaround? Like, that seems very insidious and a little bit untransparent to me, right? My only other like significant experience with the medical industrial complex involves collections. And I don't think that's an aspect that's talked about enough, because collection agencies definitely work within the medical industrial complex. I had a procedure done back in 2019. It was a minor surgical procedure, and it had to be sent like to a lab to get tested. And the test came back okay. I am fine, by the way, everybody. But like it had, like, just as a precaution, it was sent off to get tested, and I paid a fee of some sort. Like, I paid off like my deductible, for that I needed to, and they told me that I didn't have to pay anything else. They were like, nope, you're good. They're like, the lab work has been covered. Everything's been covered. You're good. Well, a month ago, I received a bill in the mail that had been sent to collections from the same procedure. Like, oh, we're sorry, we forgot about this one lab thing that we had done that you need to pay for, and it's kind of an astronomical amount. And I'm like, why was this not communicated before? Why was this not transparent before? And and I'm complaining about this one bill.
So
when
is
there
it
are
hundreds
people,
of dollars or is it thousands of dollars?
it's hundreds of dollars. Anything above 100 is astronomical to me. But as I was about to mention, though, like, here I am complaining about this one bill when there are people who experience this where they are like they have bills like with thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in collections that are automatically just sent to collections as opposed to working something out.
So before I had my first manic episode, I did have a bill go to collections. I cut my finger and I had spliced my finger and I got stitches and I got charged $150 from my doctor and I didn't realize that they wanted me to pay for it for the stitches and it went into collections and I it went on my credit and yeah, I think I still owe that money. I think.
Well, yeah, I haven't paid off this one either because I've been trying to finagle with them, but like it also went on my credit too, and I'm just like, like this is not acceptable. Like that's yeah. And unfortunately, like people will get hit by so many different unexpected bills. Like I had a friend who was in the hospital because she was giving birth, right? And she had like an itemized printout of everything down to the smallest piece of gauze that was used during her entire time there. And it was so expensive. Like, and insurance will only cover so much, right? So I was just like, this happens to people every day. Like in my privilege, I don't have to worry about that type of thing. But of course, anything could happen where I might have something really expensive, but
Did
we're
you see
knocking on
the
wood.
Did you see the woman who gave birth and she got an itemized bill and they said uh, bonding with your child $150 where they gave the child to the mother and she was holding the child. They charged her for that as part of her medical bill.
They charged her for putting the baby in her arms.
It
That
was
is
called child bonding.
that is really sad. That's really sad to me.
And she was like, are you kidding me? Like, and there was pictures of it online. I was like, I can't even like so there's a thing in my family that goes they were my grandparents didn't actually pay for my aunt's childbirth. And so when she was growing up, the hospital came around to get them to pay up for my aunt's childbirth, and so she thought that they were going to take her away
Oh,
because they didn't pay for the childbirth yet, and she was like 6 or something. She was like, "They're going to take me away."
oh, oh no. That's so sad. But it's just like, especially thinking back on that like child bonding item, like it just goes to show you that it's become so industrialized that they're finding new and inventive ways to charge people for things that are very basic, that should not be charged for, right? So this leads us to the question of, why is capitalism in healthcare bad, and is it necessarily bad? Like, let's talk about that for a second.
So I think that for the most part, it is bad because it doesn't put the patient first. It puts the hospital and profits first, and it puts the system first before it puts the patient first. And it definitely is it puts their profit margin before it puts the people and their safety before it puts uh, the well-being of the patient first, and their ability to pay for it, and their ability um, to just be able to like handle, like there's some things that you just shouldn't have to pay for. I don't think that the insurance company should cover. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you get the flu every year, or if you get the flu, that your insurance company should pay for that, and that you shouldn't. If you get pneumonia, the insurance company should cover that, and that if you go to the hospital and have an ER visit, the insurance company should cover that, and you shouldn't have to pay the bill. But
Mm-hmm.
people, but there are people who are getting charged for these hospital visits because they're getting pneumonia and the flu, and they're getting sick, and they have to pay out, and I think that's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, Rogue Agent. Like, why? Like, how? Like, can you explain why you think it's not really capitalism? Just for out of curiosity, of course, for conversation's sake. Because from my perspective, and mind you, like, we're not saying that capitalism is bad by any means, but when you get to a certain extent where the institutions become so big that their profit margins take priority over people, and where people are relegated to being numbers, and they are just relegated to being a resource for consumption, to me, that's when capitalism in that context becomes this giant consuming thing, if that makes sense. Like Leo says, for example, like US health insurance is the very definition of capitalism, right? Like the competition between insurance companies and rates, and like just this compartmentalization of what they cover versus what they don't cover, and whether you have to buy into a specific type of insurance or not, whether it's provided for you or not, um, so on and so forth. Like it's very complex, and this has been, of course, something that's evolved over the course of time, but it's become so commonplace, I would argue, that a lot of people don't really examine it from this perspective of like humans being relegated to just being figures, like numerical figures. So, um, now, do I think that, like, because obviously capitalism encourages competition, which I think is good because you want quality, right? Like you want.
Right, and that's what during the coronavirus, we had competition between Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca and Johnson and Johnson to get a cure for, or get a vaccine on the table, and they were working really fast to get a vaccine done, and I think that helped. There was competition, that they were like, "I'm going to be the first. I'm going to get it done," and they were like working to get that done fast, and there was a competition to be, I don't know, the best, or to get it to be the first, and to
Mhm.
kind of corner that market. And
Right.
I feel like that was part of a capitalist market to be that way. So necessarily it isn't a bad thing, but
Oh yeah.
um
Yeah, like Rogue Agent, we're agreeing with you on that. Like we think that competition is great. We're not saying that it's bad, that capitalism is bad necessarily, but we are saying that sometimes like
And does it go too far?
it's the institution's actions. Like capitalism is used as a tool to take something to an extent which treats people as though they are walking natural resources that are expendable, if that makes sense.
Like commodities.
Yeah, commodities, exactly.
It objectifies them.
Right. So that's the systems taking advantage of, I would interpret, a capitalistic framework, if that makes sense. The competition, I think, is what makes them do better. Yes, 100%. I think there's other variables involved too. So on and so forth.
And I think that doctors want to be good doctors regardless of whether or not there's competition.
Right. Well, yeah, and some teachers are bad, but you won't toss out all of them. No, not at all. And academia as an institution has its competition as well, but it also sometimes uses the systems as a convenient way to treat people like they are money orchards, let's just say, regardless of background, socioeconomic status, so on and so forth. But so you were mentioning the pandemic, Ari. I think that's you brought up a really good point about the pandemic. And I really also think that the pandemic really drew attention to a lot of the difficulties in the medical field, notably, especially in areas where there are fewer resources, so on and so forth, right? Because a lot of the resources are going to be placed in what the institutions think are the most vital areas with the most people or the most vulnerable populations. And there are large groups of people who get overlooked because of this, right?
Well,
Including marginalized groups.
Well, early on in the pandemic, you had people not going to get tested.
Mm-hmm.
And it was until they made it a community resource to get tested, people were not getting, there was no resource in order to get tested for coronavirus. And it was people were getting sick and there was just no infrastructure in order to get tested.
Mm-hmm.
And it was taking too long to get tested.
Right.
It was taking 3 or 4 days, and then all of a sudden it's oh, you have coronavirus, you have to, and people are just walking around with coronavirus, spreading their disease.
Yep.
And
it's really, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was just really interesting to see, especially during the first few months of the pandemic, all the different decisions that were made and the resources that were allocated in order to improve that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the nature of the medical industrial complex as well. There is a greater access to resources, right, than a lot of other institutions have. And of course, there's a certain aspect of that that's pretty important, though, because it also is dependent on people's lives. People's lives were at stake, so that's why it was so prioritized. So if we look at other countries, though, Ari, how does our medical industrial complex compare? And before you answer that, thank you for joining us, Rogue Agent. It was good seeing you.
Oh,
hope to see you again next week.
Before I answer that, I don't know why Pfizer isn't making a booster for the Delta variant. But as far as I know, if you have the shot, your chances of getting the Delta variant are relatively low. So I do understand that the Delta variant is out there, but um, if you do have the vaccine, it should cover you for a while. So maybe they think that like you just won't your chances of getting it if you do have the vaccine are low, so they don't think it's necessary and that
Mhm.
it's costly to make a booster, that the vaccine should cover you up until a certain point. But
Well, I think they're banking on it covering people until at least herd immunity is achieved.
because they're just trying to get people to get the vaccine, they're not even like worried about the booster yet.
Hmm. So, like, I mean, this kind of like deviates from talking about the medical industrial complex slightly, but I think it's worth mentioning. Like, what do you think about different states and institutions and companies incentivizing getting vaccinated?
I think it's a good thing. I think that uh, it promotes uh, the vaccine. I think that like anything that it gets people to get the vaccine is a good thing. Um, I think that like people need to get vaccinated, and like there are some certain people who are holding out because they're scared, and anything that can calm their fears down, even if it's just like, you know, hey, I'm gonna get a free beer and $100 for getting a vaccine. Sure, I'll do it. Or I'll
Yep.
have a chance to win $50,000 in a drawing. Sure, I'll do it.
Well, yeah, it seems like honestly kind of like a last resort effort, right? Because this whole incentivization did not happen earlier on in the pandemic. Like we're just at a point where vaccinations have plateaued, right? And we see a lot of different regions, like the central Midwest, for example, where there are a lot of unvaccinated people, where um, like there are spikes in the Delta variant, for example, right? So this incentivizing is intended to help maybe fill that gap a little bit. And like I watched the news today and they said that there has been a spike in COVID vaccinations over the past couple of days, probably a lot attributed to those incentivizations. Incentivizations is not a word, Donnie.
Incentives. That's fine.
Incentives. Goodness.
Yeah. Welcome back, Shayna.
It's good to see you. Um, so, what are examples of things that happen within the medical industrial complex? For example, like we could talk about bankruptcies, competitive medicine, like what are some interesting aspects that we should note?
So yeah, with medical industrial complex, if you get a bill, there's a chance that like all of a sudden you'll become bankrupt and all of you'll have to like refinance your home or like take on a mortgage or just to pay the bill off. And it changes your whole life. You have to file for Chapter 11 because you got sick and like you got cancer and you got a huge bill and your whole life changed and you're stuck with the medical bills. So
Yeah,
that it's a huge like that's the number one uh, cause for bankruptcy in America is medical bills.
which is really
And
unsettling to think about.
it's true. And it's in the United States only. It's not happening around the world. It's only in the United States. Because Canada, they have universal health care, and most other countries have universal health care where they pay for most things except for like highly specialized procedures.
Hmm.
Um, So you don't have to pay for a whole lot unless it's like a very specific procedure. So, yeah, it seems like those costs get really reduced to a very minimal amount of things. Yeah,
So, like,
ambulance
when
rides are like very expensive, and then just
mhm.
riding an ambulance, just going to the hospital. I got a $20,000 ambulance bill, and I didn't get a choice. I had to ride in an ambulance because I was transported from jail to the mental hospital, and I got an ambulance bill for that.
Mhm. Wow. Just for the transport?
Yes, they
That
they sent me a bill for that, and I was like, I didn't get a choice. You put me on a stretcher, strapped me to a stretcher. Literally, I like was tied down to the stretcher, and you put me in an ambulance and transported me. And I had no say whether or not I could be in an ambulance. And you're
wow.
charging me for it.
Not only is that in a way traumatizing, but that's like to me that seems like an injustice.
That's why I didn't end up having to pay for it, is because I was like, I'm not paying for this bill.
Mhm. I'm glad that you stood up to them on that because I mean we know those like billing agencies and companies, they can be very
Pushy.
very pushy, domineering, so on and so forth. I know like my
It
aunt.
went in it went into collections before I had to like say something.
Wow.
So it was bad.
I had a family member who was airlifted from one hospital to another, and the bill was like 60 to 70 grand, which I'm just on top of an ambulance bill as well, mind you, for the original hospital that they had gone to. So I'm just like, wow, like
Expensive.
heaven forbid we get transported to a hospital in an emergency. That's it's I mean, it's so horrible when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about the mental health crisis and the medical industrial complex. So, how do you think what we've been discussing hinders the mental health crisis in a way?
So they got rid of state mental hospitals back in the 80s and 90s. So there are very few to almost no state mental hospitals anymore. They made it outpatient. So because people weren't paying for state mental hospitals, and it just long-term care basically wasn't cost effective. So you have in the inner cities people who are mentally ill wandering in the streets. And you have people who are in most cities mentally ill who will commit a crime because they're mentally ill, and they won't go to the hospital, they'll go to jail.
Hmm.
And they'll spend time in jail. They'll be put on medication for a while they're in jail. Then they'll serve their sentence. They'll be released, and then they'll go off their medication because they won't have the funding for medication, and then they'll commit another crime, and then the cycle will go over again. And they'll spend stints in uh, uh, local hospitals sometimes, but not for long periods of time. but they won't hold them for very long. So it's just this never-ending cycle of being turned out into the city, and
Right.
they're just
Well, it's because through this institutionalized lens, like I would argue that the institution itself believes that these people are just a tax on resources, right? So why expend any resources when you could just find a convenient justification to turn them away? And then, of course, the like jail systems, so on and so forth, are then tasked with the responsibility of, and the expense of detaining these people and not giving them the proper help that they need and not
right
sustaining that help.
because they're considered criminals, not mentally
Mm-hmm.
ill.
Yep. Okay, Leo, you have a good night. It was good seeing you.
So it's not even that they're like, it's not even that they're helping them, it's that they're considering them to be like a burden on society instead of helping.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen it, and so they get, I saw it happen. Like, people were in and out of the mental hospital. I went to the mental hospital 4 times, and I saw people who had been there 4 times, and they were in and out, and they were like, yeah, I this is my fourth stint, or my 16th stint here. I've been in and out every 2 weeks since you've been here.
Wow.
I'll leave, and then I'll go home for about, or I'll go out into the world, and I'll be at the homeless shelter for a few days, and then I'll cause trouble, and then I'm right back in.
Mm-hmm. So it's
And
just
I'm
like
like,
bouncing back between one place and another.
right.
Wow.
And they did that for over a year.
So that's like one significant example why this affects mental health notably. Um, Another example that I don't think is talked about widely enough are like insurance companies and at times the lack of coverage of mental health services. I'm thankful that my insurance covers mental health services, but I've had insurances in the past that did not. So like all mental health services were literally out of pocket, which mental health services are very costly. They are almost as costly, if not more, than like physical procedures, so on and so forth over a time. And unfortunately, that's what limits so many people access to actually getting help for mental health purposes.
I got approved for Medicare, and then I got a note from my insurance company, who was Medicaid, saying that I was not supposed to be receiving therapy, a long-term therapy, that I was not approved for that, but they're not making them charge back the money that they had charged to the insurance company, but their Medicaid wouldn't be paying for it anymore. I had to do it through Medicare.
That's odd.
Yeah. And I was like,
It's like,
so,
what?
I wasn't supposed to be receiving therapy at all, long-term therapy, because it wasn't approved. And I
I
was
just don't
like, but I've been receiving it. I was
but
like,
I just don't
so I
understand
was
why.
only receiving it. I was only receiving it because the system had overlooked me.
I just don't understand how a system that purports to be this thorough can overlook something like that if it really was an issue. Like, that's ridiculous. I mean, that just proves that there are flaws that need to be fixed 100%.
I'm glad it did, because I received good mental health services that I needed.
True. Yes. But it's like, and it makes me wonder, like, who else was denied that access though, because of this what policy or whatever they deem doesn't allow people to have long-term access to mental health services, right?
Right.
So I mean if we think about accessibility, like we could also talk about how this affects low income communities as well, right? So like obviously like there are a lot of different groups of people in our country, like wealthy groups, who have greater access to quality and immediate medical care, whereas there are marginalized groups or groups that have fewer bit points of access where like they end up being placed on waiting lists. They end up having to jump through a bunch of different hoops just to even get basic things done that
When they have a medical emergency at the hospital, they have to wait.
Mm-hmm.
And even then they might not be seen right away.
Exactly. And that's, I mean, that's like, it's very much classist in a way when you think about it, which is really unsettling. And I feel like that's kind of like the elephant in the room that's not really talked about. Like it's kind of like, I feel like people are aware that it's there, but nothing's really done to confront it or to fix it in a significant way.
I feel like you
So,
literally have to be dying in order to be seen right away at
mhm.
at an ER and some ERs. And my friend Brian posted about the Mount Pleasant ER that you literally have to be bleeding out before they will see you. And like, don't go to that
Wow.
ER because it's a bad ER.
I've heard that before too, yeah. Like the wait times are just astronomical. Um, I had a friend who like literally cut a chunk off her pinky finger and was like profusely bleeding. And so I like took her to the hospital and we ended up waiting in the emergency room for like an hour and a half, 2 hours while she was
Bad.
bleeding. And it's just like this is something that requires something immediate, right? This isn't something that you can just delay.
Yeah.
So we have about 8 minutes left. Are there any other specific questions? Because we always come up with a lot of questions for these shows because we like to cover a lot of different bases. Are there any specific questions that you wanted to touch on?
Uh, let's talk about big pharma.
Okay, so big pharma, like what roles do insurance companies and big pharma have in the medical industrial complex? Well, I would argue that we see like a lot of competition between insurance companies, right? Like you also see a lot of competition between different agencies and institutions within big pharma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like there are instances where very basic medications are hiked price wise to astronomical levels, right? Where like maybe certain groups of people might have access to those through their insurance, but like certain insurance companies might, change their policies and then they have to pay like these astronomical prices.
The thing I'm thinking about is the price of insulin has gone
Mm-hmm.
up like 600, what is it, like 600% or something like that? It's like so expensive to get insulin.
Yep. And that's like a life and death medication that people need. And I remember a few years back, like this happened with HIV AIDS medications as
Mm-hmm.
well. Oh, what was that guy's name that like ended up getting in trouble for that? I can't even remember his name.
Oh,
But I remember like he kind of like just scoffed and laughed about the fact that like these medications were hiked to astronomical levels because, I mean, it was being done at the expense of people, right? People.
Oh,
Um,
Shrek Kelly.
oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a couple other names that I can't think of off the top of my head too, but because I know there's a few like big
Martin
pharma people.
Shkreli.
Yep. Yep. That's the person specifically that I'm thinking of. Yeah. And it just goes to show you that like a lot of people who oversee this type of thing don't really consider how price hikes like this could be life threatening to people, right?
Martin Shkreli's in jail though now for fraud.
Yeah, like this person was,
But it
well, I
has
think,
nothing to do with price
yeah,
hikes. It has to do with he did something with the stock market.
I
He
think
did
there wasn't there like embezzlement or something, or
something. He had something to do with money wiring or something. He was
yeah.
doing something bad with white
So
collar crime.
he wasn't even held accountable for the horrible things that he was doing to large groups of people. No, it was just some other thing.
Some white collar crime.
Oh my goodness. But um so when it comes to things changing, because like obviously like one goal we have with this show is we like to think about like what solutions there could be out there, right? Like if we were to think about like how this could change or what could be done to make the medical industrial complex more conscious and more helpful toward people, especially people in communities that don't have access, like what could be done in your opinion?
So I think in order to make the healthcare system better, we need to go to a universal healthcare system. Like we're already moving towards that, but just making our universal healthcare system more universal and bringing the healthcare costs down,
Mm-hmm.
um, making it more universal and making it so that the insurance is more competitive, so that like the healthcare costs are lower, and that they cover more things for people, so that if you get sick, you're not entirely bankrupted.
Right. I also think another way that could fix this, or at least help, would be to find more effective means to hold big pharma accountable, like insurance companies accountable. Like there are already some things in place, but like
I think we should also pass laws that make it so that you can't advertise pharmaceutical companies on television and the internet anymore in the United States. I think that like is so wrong, and I think that it's like such a disgusting thing that happens in this country, that like
mhm.
advertising of pharma like drugs in this country is so gross.
It
I
is really terrifying now that I think about it.
Well, it's just like they don't do that in other countries, and like we do it in our country, and it's like where in any sane country, like, oh yeah, let me get that new heart medication. Let me talk to my doctor about getting this designer brand of heart medication. Like I saw it on a TV ad or a magazine ad, like a full page spread magazine ad, and here's all the risks, like all of the things that I could get if I take this drug they told me in the ad. Like I just it boggles my mind. Like I don't know. I just don't think that like designer drugs should exist, because it's for one, it's for wealthy people, and two, um it's just gross. It's
Well, and
just
I think it also a lot of the time misrepresents um the drugs and their effect too. I've really honed in on mental health drug related commercials because they paint like I feel like they kind of give people this unrealistic expectation from medications. Like, you put yourself on this, it's going to be a complete.
I had bipolar depression, and now I'm so much better.
Right, and not like, and
And
it,
it shows a
does,
woman like making pots.
yeah, and it's just like does this really represent people well? And I would argue no, it does not. Like, so like it is really unsettling though to see that degree of advertisement taking place. It's like they're being advertised like car commercials. And don't even get me started on those because those are dreadful all the time. So
Or they're being advertised like any commodity, like a regular commodity.
mhm.
And it's not a regular commodity. It's something that alters your body.
Right, yeah. It's something that you can have side effects to, something that possibly might not even work for you, like, because people's bodies react differently to certain medications. So it's just, I don't know, like, it's very complex. Everything's complex really regarding the medical complex. You've not figured that out yet. So, but like, truthfully, like, I think a big topic like this could use, like, I mean, we could continue on talking about this in other streams as well, like, especially like if we talked about like the veteran side of things too, because there's a whole like we could even dedicate an entire episode just talking about like mental health accessibility. But well, now that we've come to the end of our time tonight, Ari, do you have any parting words for our dear listeners this evening?
We slayed the
This is a
beast.
hard one.
We got the beast.
Oh, wait. These were the parting words. Be kind, rewind.
Aha.
Aha. That's too funny. All right, everyone. So next week we will be having a guest on our channel. We will be having my dear friend Sherry Archer from the YouTube channel Sherry Makes Things. And the topic of the next episode is going to be the art of journaling part 2. So it's going to be much more lighthearted compared to this very difficult conversation about the medical industrial complex. All right. Well, we love you, everyone. Go subscribe to our channels if you haven't yet. Check out our stuff. We really appreciate the support. And we will see you again next Thursday. We love you. Bye.